Everyone doing well? I'm going to talk to you about step debugging today. I'm Gary. I work at Rove. You may have seen James speak yesterday. He works at Rove too, and Susanna works at Rove. So we're very Rove heavy this conference. We're a consultancy company who are specialized in trying to help you to ship with more confidence, I think is fair. So we specialize in code quality, testing, PHP, Java, any other languages, pipelines, continuous integration, all that good stuff to help you to like level up your code and ship quicker and more confidently. And you can join our Rove. I think James did a good job yesterday. You can join our Discord, not join our Rove. James did a good job yesterday at promoting our Discord, so come and hang out in Discord if you want. Free advice from other like-minded developers. It's great. I think it's really taken off and helping out. Anyway, I'm going to talk about step debugging. Does anyone here use step debugging at the moment, currently? Because this is a gauge to how much of a waste of time this talk's going to be for some people. Okay, yeah, a fair number of people. Good. So yeah, I'm going to talk to you about step debugging, and again, join our Discord, it's fine. So what is step debugging? Let's take this from the ground up, and let's talk about some debugging at first. So, I mean, everybody here, even the people who are using step debuggers, still use like vardump or Laravels, like dd to vardump and die. Arn's looking at me like he doesn't use vardump anymore. Pro-level programmer right there, but I think everybody understands there's a use case for vardump, right? It's good. It's a good, useful tool for your really quick level. Oh, what's going on here? I haven't got a clue. Like, why is this variable false when I'm expecting it to be true? All this other good stuff. Vardump's great. You know, we use it all the time in our day-to-day software development. I still use it all of the time just to have a really quick snapshot about what's going on. And it's fantastic. And then sometimes you find yourself in a living like hell of like vardump, where you're really trying to figure out exactly what's going on with echoes and vardumps, right? I don't understand the logic of what's going on here, so I'm echoing out first if. I'm inside of the first if, I've got that far, and then I'm like, oh, there's a switch statement. Which one of these switch statements are being triggered? Is it the delete? Is it the update? Is it the default? And then you dump in the result at the end, and you're getting into this really weird situation where you're having to write tons of extra lines of code into your application. And I'm going to put my hand up and say, I have shipped code to production with some debugging information accidentally left in the application, right? I've done it. It's like a destructive way of debugging, because you have to add extra code and then remove it later on. And that's the big downside of this. Aside from being a pain in the ass to actually do, it's a destructive way of debugging. You know, Xdebug kind of fixes that for us by allowing us to step through each of our levels of code execution and see exactly what's going on in a non-destructive way. We don't have to put anything into the code in order to view the results of our code execution. So I love it. And it allows us to step debug PHP scripts. It also allows us to do performance analysis and tons of other good things. But today we're going to be looking at just the debugging. So it's written by our friend Derek Rettens. I think Derek's in PHP Tech at the moment in Chicago. Is that Chicago? So I'm sure he'd love it if he woke up to some nice tweets saying, thank you, Derek. He doesn't like it, so please tweet him and say thank you, Derek. It'll be great. So Derek is the kind of person who's responsible for maintaining Xdebug. Thank you, Derek. I really mean it. Thank you, Derek. So I really wanted to just double down on what I said a minute ago. Every tool has its place. I'm really sad to see in recent years there's a ton of this like tribalism creeping into this software community, and there's no need of it at all. People will tell you, oh, you don't need Xdebug. You've got, if you're doing it right, you can be using just vardump and die. And people will be telling you, oh, why are you using vardump? You should be using only Xdebug. That's what the professionals use. And It's all complete bullshit. Just every tool we have has its place. And it really gets to me when people are saying, oh, you should be doing it this way, you should be doing it that way. I think it's just important that you have access to every tool that can help you do your job quicker, more efficiently, and be more productive. And it's up to you to make the decision which tool is right for this situation. There's some great tools out there. Login is a great way of debugging, particularly when you're trying to narrow down some problems that are in production. You'd probably use login of these things and look at how to debug those logs by figuring out what's going on in production. And there's Ray by Spacey, I don't know how to pronounce that company, sorry, which is great, but it's kind of a VAD login replacement that goes to this specific application. It's fantastic. But again, it's a destructive way of debugging because you have to remember to take those things out before they go to production. So there's all these amazing tools, and every tool has its place. And don't be caught up in the tribalism by saying, oh, my way is better than your way, and your way, that's not helping any of us. I've done my rant. Now we can talk about technology again. It's all good. So yeah, how does debugging work in PHP? I see some very, very bright people in the room who are probably going to criticize my oversimplification of this. But the way I understand it is that there's a client and a server relationship, right? So the client in this instance is PHP itself in a kind of inversion of the way that I expected it to be. PHP is the client in this situation, and then your Xdebug server is the IDE you're using to step debug. So for me, I'm going to be using PhpStorm today, just because that's what I've always used, and I think it's a relatively easy setup for PhpStorm. From what I understand, other things like VS Code, Vim, whatever your IDE of choice, have their own plugins that will make this relatively straightforward for you. I'm going to use PhpStorm today. Other IDEs are available. I don't work for JetBrains anymore, so this isn't like a shill thing. It's just what I'm familiar with. It's all fine. Yeah, so the first thing we need to do is to install the Xdebug extension. I'm working locally today. I'm kind of not working locally because I'm on Windows, so I'm using the Windows Linux subset. So I'm kind of working locally, but in a VM, but kind of locally, but kind of not. But everything I show today will be as if it's a local install. It's exactly the same procedure if you're using something like a Dockerized environment, Laravel Sail, or if you're using anything. I think the only problem comes slightly is if you're using like a virtual machine to run your dev environment, and then your IDE is outside of that virtual machine. I'm not talking about Docker containerized stuff. It can be a bit more painful. Excuse me. Hit me up, join the Discord, give me a shout, we'll get that working together, that's not a problem. It just needs a little bit more tweaks. But what I show you today is probably the 95% solution. So OS X, brew install, PHP version Xdebug, pretty straightforward if you run in your PHP locally. Linux, apt-get install or yum install PHP version Xdebug, pretty straightforward. Windows, now I did write good luck because these slides are from before I now develop on a Windows environment. I haven't got PHP and Xdebug running on my native Windows install, but WSL2 is fantastic and makes Windows a really viable choice for developing now. There's probably a talk in that for next year. If anyone wants to hear how to develop on Windows with WSL2, we can probably make that happen for next year. But yeah, you pretty much just use the Linux install now because you're using Ubuntu, so it's all good. Or you can download the binaries if you're running it natively. It does work. I have tested it. It's a little more painful. And then this is what we expect to see. So php-v, excuse me, with Xdebug installed. You should see this in your PHP info as well, if that's another way to check. The next thing we want to do is to configure Xdebug. So I use php-ini to find out where Xdebug's configuration lives. You can see on my machine here, it's living in etc. PHP 8.1 CLI conf-d Xdebug. So that's the file I want to edit. And then we open that file up in Vim and we just add those two extra configurations. Xdebug mode equals debug, because as I can see, it's like there's a performance, there's a way to profile, there's all these other different modes. We're only interested in debug today. And then the magic for me, I think, is Xdebug discover client host equals on. And that kind of tells Xdebug assume that the client is the same IP address that made the request, essentially. So you don't have to actually configure it with an IP address or use like Docker's host naming and stuff. It just works for me when I use that magical line, which I think really simplifies this stuff, especially when you're in a containerized environment or whatever. I just use those two and you're all good. So yeah, we install Xdebug, we check the config, we configure Xdebug, and we've installed it. So that's our first step. Great. Yeah, please don't use Xdebug in production. I'm hopeful I don't really need to say this so much anymore, but last time I gave this talk, people were like, oh yeah, I've used Xdebug in production to solve this very specific problem, and then I uninstalled it, and I'm like, I think you're feeling called out because you know that was like kind of not a very sensible idea, and that's why you're trying to tell me why you did it, and yeah, just don't use it in production. It's a recipe for disasters, security, if nothing else. You know, you're wondering why all of a sudden your servers are slow because somebody's figured out that they can turn on the profiler, and yeah, it's just not a good idea. So the next thing we need to do is tell Xdebug that we want to debug. Excuse me. From a browser perspective, we can do this using either a query string parameter or setting a cookie with xdebug_session equals anything. It used to be that this used to have to match your IDE, and it was all a real pain, but thankfully no longer a problem. That can be anything you want. I'm sorry if I triggered any Italians. I apologize. I couldn't resist. Unfortunately, most of these jokes are for Marco's sake, and he's not here because I know it would really wind him up, so it's all good. So yeah, you can just do xdebug_session equals whatever you want. I use this. I don't actually use this. There's a ton of these little these browser plugins, which I choose to think that it's okay for a plugin that literally has to set a cookie on a specific site to have access to all of my browser tabs. You make your own decisions. I am not telling you that it's fine to install these things. Please make your own mind up. I use it because I'm lazy and it's convenient, and I'm choosing to think that the plugin developer is not going to do anything really bad, but that's your choice. So then we can just set debug with the little plugin, and that's even more convenient for me. So yeah, how does this actually work when we start? So we've set the cookie using our little plugin. How does it work? Well, the client PHP will say, oh, I can see that there's supposed to be an Xdebug server listening for debug. Hello, are you there? And the server says, yep, I'm here, I'm listening. Here's a list of breakpoints that I want you to be aware of. And the client, PHP, will hit one of those breakpoint conditions and go, oh, I've hit one of these breakpoints, and send a ton of data to the server saying, this is what's happening, I've hit this breakpoint. And then it'll just sit there waiting for instructions from the server. And so it'll just sit there indefinitely until it gets another instruction from the server to say, oh, okay, can you do this now? Step into, for example. We'll cover what all this stuff is right now. What's a breakpoint? It's just, please break at this point and tell the server what's going on. It's like literally just like, oh, please stop here, stop execution of PHP and tell the server what's going on. It was actually named after Point Break, the 1990, no, that's a terrible joke, and I leave it in every year, and it doesn't work. Let's not go there. So yeah, next thing we need to do is to tell PhpStorm to listen. It's just clicking a button in PhpStorm to say off to on. I always forget which of these means off and which of these means on. It's fine. So I've talked long enough. It's time for live demo time, because I love to put myself through this. Anyone recognize this slide? Anyone know where this is from? I hear Fallout. That's good. Yep. It's from Fallout. Please stand by. So yeah, let's go to my IDE. My voice is breaking and I apologize. Let's turn on, I don't even know if you can see that well from there. Yep, it's good. So you can see I'm not debugging at the moment, and I'm going to turn on step debugging. So I'm just going to click start listening for PHP debug connections. I haven't done any configuration in my IDE. This is as it comes out of the box. Excuse me. There's no configuration in the IDE at all. All I've done is what we ran through in the slides. I've installed Xdebug. I've turned on those two configuration values that we said. And then I've literally ran a PHP artisan serve because I'm using I'm using Laravel for this example because I imagine a lot of people are using Laravel, so there's some, there's some use there. So that's literally all I've done. I've done no wizardry, I've done no magic behind the scenes, that's all I've done. And when this doesn't work, I'm going to look even more, even more embarrassed, but it's fine. So yeah, we click the button to tell, did we click the button? Yes, we've got the little I'm listening icon. So we go to our browser here, and I have a little Xdebug, helper app installed, the same that I just showed you. So if I refresh this page, we don't get anything happening. And then I click debugging so that it sets and sends the cookie and refresh, and I don't get anything happening because of course I don't. Let's figure out what's going on together. It's great. Okay, debug session finished without being paused because I didn't set a breakpoint. So it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do because I didn't tell it to stop at any point. So let's tell it to stop right here on line 5. So in PhpStorm, I'm just clicking in the margin. That allows you to set the breakpoint quickly. So then again, I've got my little debug starter sending the cookie. I'm listening for connections in PhpStorm. These are the important things. I refresh my page, and now you can see in the top left, it's just hung. My script is just hung, and if I go back to my IDE, you can see that I'm in the debug mode of PhpStorm. Now, if you were running this natively on Linux or on your Mac or even on Windows natively, it's really cool because it puts your IDE into focus, so you don't have to just sit there going, what's going on? It'll flash your IDE to the front so you can see it. Because I'm using WSL2, it's a little bit weird, but we've stopped, right? So you can see the interesting thing here is we're generating a random number between 1 and 100. You can see what that random number is right here now, right? Right in the comment, it's set to 72. And then you can see, okay, great. Down here we can see some more information. So we can see the random number. We can see the global, the super global variables here to see what's going on. Probably giving things away about my laptop there that I didn't want to, but it's fine. I kind of do that for a living, reveal secret information on stream and stuff, so it's all good. It's fine. But yeah, in the simplest form, that's how this is how we do step debugging. We now have information available to us that we would have used var dump to get previously, right? We would have probably thrown a var dump and die in here, and we don't need to anymore. So I'm going to pimp the Discord again. If you get this far and you can't, it's not working for you, jump on Discord and ping me and I'll give you a hand. No problem at all. No problem at all. Or I'll put you in touch with Derek to give you a hand. That's the more evil way to say it. It's fine. So yeah, what can we do? Now that we've actually got our debug session started, there's a few things that we can do. This is kind of the meat and potatoes of what we want to do. It's all very well being able to see a variable at a specific point. That's useful in itself, right? That really is. But there's other things that we need to be able to and want to be able to do. So we can step over using F8. These key bindings are, I think they're universal, or maybe they're different on a Mac, so sorry. So we can step over the current function. So what we can do there is we can step over a function, so we can execute what happens inside of that function or method and see what the return is without being bogged down with going into the nest of what the heck's happening inside of that function. Really useful. All of these are useful. I guess show don't tell again is probably sensible. So if I remember this is the important stuff for me when I'm step debugging, is A, remember to remove that breakpoint because it'll catch me out some other time. Not so much in this instance because it's a really simple file, but when you're debugging in anger. 2, remember to resume the program because my browser's just sitting there waiting for instructions from Xdebug, and that can be really confusing when you come back and go, oh, what's going on here? So yeah, resume program means, okay, I'm done with my debugging. Can you continue the execution of this script, please? As if I'd finished debugging, so you can see now this request response has happened and everything's working again. So I always try and remember to A, remove my breakpoints when I'm done with them, and B, resume program or terminate the session when I'm done with it. So let's take a look at something a little bit more complicated. So this is just a really nonsensical Laravel controller, right? That just uses the convenient string return to return some stuff from a controller in Laravel. The only reason I'm doing it this way is because now we're using some some functions, some static functions here to do some code instead so that I can explain step over and step into. So yeah, if I set a breakpoint here, do all of my normal ritual, PhpStorm is listening, thank you very much, go back to my browser, and then go to this, the root here, so Xdebug-demo. So this is now a normal Laravel controller. I'm not doing that really simple like script. Everything of Laravel is being bootstrapped. The controller, the routing is happening, all of the middleware is being fired, and then we're getting down to the controller. So I've set a breakpoint at a place where I don't care about Laravel routing all of this stuff. I don't want to know and step around and see what's going on under the hood in Laravel. I really only want to be able to debug my userland code, right? So I've set a breakpoint inside the controller. That's great. We're listening for, Xdebug starter is running. That's great. So I would expect this to just debug. So yep, it's kind of hang in there. So now we can see, like, great, this is stopped here. You can see that the stack of things that have run to get this far. So this pane shows you everything that has run in order to get to this point in the execution. You can see how much more complex that is now because we've got all of Laravel's routing and probably all of the service manager configuration and all of the session stuff and verifying. All of this stuff has run right before we even get to our controller, which is kind of useful because you can look at the state of those classes too. But really what we need to do now is to step over. So you can see here's our way of navigating around this code now. So in this instance, I want to step over. So I want to run the code that's inside, get a number that is unpredictable, and then I want to see what the result is. So in this case, it's throwing an exception, which isn't a great example. Let's fix that right now. I know why this is throwing an exception, and this is going to be really weird. The reason it's throwing an exception is because I was testing this code yesterday on a Thursday, believe it or not. So that's why it's throwing an exception. I forgot to change my code ready for the demo on the Friday, but that's fine. And it's just me writing some nonsense, kind of easy to understand code to explain step debugging. So let's try that again. So easy for me to try that again. I can just click, this just terminates the execution. I don't care about the output anymore because I'd messed up. And then I just refresh the page. And then we go back in. And now I should be able to step over this and get a response because it's not throwing an exception. And you can see exactly the same way as before, that it's just showing us the value of the return from that function, which is useful. And then we can step over this is odd and go, oh, hang on. Why is this returning even? This should number 77, something odd, weird's going on here. There's a bug in my code, and I found it by stepping over because 77 is an odd number, and we're returning even. So, this definitely has a bug in it somewhere because we shouldn't be returning this. So that's step over. It's pretty straightforward. I don't think we set up for questions during the talk, right? There's no. It's fine, I can shout them out. Any questions so far? Either I'm doing a really good job or nobody's listening. It's fine. So yeah, the next part after stepping over is obviously stepping into. So I know there's a problem in that isOdd function. I want to step into that function now and see the execution. I kind of wrote this. I could have just written inline functions, but I'm trying to write it in a way that mimics the real world because I wanted to show you that it finds that file on the file system and opens it up in the IDE for you. You don't have to go looking for it yourself. It's tracing the execution through the files for you. So yeah, we can step into the current function and method. And more useful when you're working with a framework is step out. Step out is like the one MVP, the understated kind of most useful method to use in this situation when you're working with a framework. Because you'll click something expecting to go into your userland code, and all of a sudden you'll be like layers deep in the framework code that you didn't expect, and you're like, oh, I didn't want to be here. Can you like get me out of here? Step out, get back to my code. That's magic for you folks. So yeah, let's take a look at these. And again, let's start a new Xdebug session by terminating the last one and refreshing the page. So yeah, we're hanging while we wait for Xdebug. Now I can step into the nonsense service and see this code. So if I click step into, you can see exactly what's happened here is what I just said. I'm not at a place where I expected to be. What's going on? I'm in Laravel Framework Source Illuminate Foundation Alias Loader. Hell, what the? Oh, I don't want to be here. So now step out's my friend. I'm like, okay, I went somewhere I wasn't expecting to be. Let's like step out of that. It's weirdly brought me back to the userland code in the controller. I don't pretend to understand how Xdebug works. I just try and help other people to get Xdebug working. So we can step in again. And it's like, oh, now I'm in the autoloader. I really don't want to be in the autoloader. Let's like step out because that scares me. And then we can step into again, and I get into my userland code. You get kind of used to this. And then really what you would do in the real world is just set the breakpoint here instead of outside of the function, so you don't have to go through this every time. So yeah, now we can like step over or step into here. So day of the week, okay, what's that likely to be? That's Friday, it's correct, well done. So if day of the week Friday equals true, okay, it is true because it is a Friday, then we can generate our random number. And then once we hit the return, it takes us back out to where we were before. So exactly as you would expect this to work, it works. So let's take another look into the is odd. Oh, okay, this probably should be not equals. Hello, what? This keyboard. Oh, I've got some kind of weird ligatures turned on, I think. Is that what's happening there? Anyone seen that before? Yeah? No? Is it like I've got some weird... Oh, Jesus Christ. I am a professional consultant at PHP, and you can hire me at any time. It's fine. It's all good. Yeah, it's fine. Okay, so yeah, we fixed this now. We can step out. We don't need to be in here anymore. And then we can rerun the code and see what the result is. So it's kind of, there's patterns emerging right here, right? For me, genuinely, the biggest difficulties here are installing and configuring Xdebug. It used to be a massive pain, and I think it honestly was one of the biggest pain points for me. Like when I set up a new developer environment, I would always var dump and die until I hit the situation where I really needed Xdebug, and then go, oh, I'm going to waste 2 hours of my life now trying to get Xdebug running. And then when it was running, it's like, okay, I mustn't touch this at all because I really don't want the whole stack, the Jenga, to fall over and my Xdebug to stop working. But it's really not like that anymore. I think I read a few tweets and comments on Reddit before I did this talk, and people are like, oh yeah, I love Xdebug when it's running, but I can never be bothered to spend the time getting it running. It's really not like that anymore. I'm showing you PhpStorm, and I really think it's this simple in VS Code, for example. I know people have told me it's really easy. Vim, I have no idea. All bets are off with Vim, but yeah. So we can do some more advanced stuff with breakpoints, which are kind of cool. There are some situations where you only want to break given certain conditions. It's named after the Point Break remake that I genuinely didn't even know was a thing. Did anyone know there was a remake of Point Break? Yeah, is it any good? No. Kind of what I was expecting to hear there, to be honest. Yeah, that's fine. If a joke really, really doesn't fail to land, like just double down on it and go again. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. So yeah, we can view the breakpoints. This is a real misnomer in PhpStorm. This is where you can view, add, remove, edit existing breakpoints. So let's take a quick look. I think this is really interesting to me, is that you can view your breakpoints. So if I don't know where all my breakpoints are, clicking on this little button here in the bar gives me a list of all of my breakpoints. And I'm like, oh yeah, I obviously have done this talk before and forgotten to reset that breakpoint, so let's pretend we didn't see that one. This is really useful for figuring out what's going on. And I think what's really interesting for me is that you can create breakpoints that only fire on a condition. So for example, I can right click on this breakpoint and edit it that way. So we can give it a condition, and this can be any PHP condition, right? It can be any piece of PHP code. So let's just say, okay, I only want to break if the number returned is less than 25, say. So I don't know why I want to do that. It's a terrible example for the real world, but you can see that there could be places where you would want to set this breakpoint only with this condition, particularly if there's some unpredictability upstream. You're like, okay, I only want to break on this condition. Really, really useful. So in this instance, we're listening for debug connections. We go back to our browser. We've got our little Xdebug starter running, and if I refresh the page, you can see it's like not starting Xdebug. It's not halting execution and throw me over to Xdebug until that number's less than 25, which the random gods are against me. Come on, prove me right. No, what have I, is this, no, oh, it's fine. You have to trust me, it's fine. I need to set the breakpoint here because I'm setting it before number is even. It's fine. It's fine. No, it's fine. Look, it's great. The random gods are with me now. So yeah, you can see this only fired because number was 2. I think that actually brings up a really interesting point, is that where you set the breakpoints can be non-intuitive, because the way, like this is where I really, is Dan in the room? Dan Ackroyd? No, is George? Are there anyone for internals here? Fantastic, I can mangle this as much as I want. Once PHP actually starts to get executed, loads of lines just get like moshed onto the same line in the interpreter, and so you think that you could set a breakpoint at somewhere that ends up not breaking, and that's just something you get used to. Like for example, I couldn't set a breakpoint on an empty line, even though you'd think you might be able to, it just wouldn't work. So setting your breakpoints in useful places is probably useful. Okay, how are we off time? We got a little bit more time, so we can go on to bonus number 1. The console. The console's great, and I'm really going to fly over this really quickly because I really want to get to bonus point number 2, and we've probably got enough time for it. So if I fire my breakpoint off here, you can see that as expected, actually I didn't rerun this, so let's restart this so that I'm in a clean debug session. The number's 15. So we've got a console like you would see in the browser, right? The JavaScript console you've got in the browser is really useful for debugging JavaScript and seeing what's going on. And we've got the same thing here. So we can type we can see the value of things. So number is 15, like you would expect if you were in JavaScript. We can set the value of variables. So number's now like 10,000, which actually, it couldn't be in my code, so this can be kind of useful for testing an idea to think, oh, would that help or hinder? And you can even run code from, inside of where you are. So like I could run this get middleware. I'm expecting this will error, but oh no, it did work. So we can run code from within the console. It's really, really useful. I use this a lot, particularly when I'm working on like legacy code bases and I'm trying to understand how the code is working. This can be really, really, really useful. And because we're running shy on time, I'm getting faster. Again, I can help you if you join the Discord Rove. Please help join and how I will, that's fine. Double bonus, command line. This is really, really useful. I didn't know this was a thing for a period of time. Someone at a conference said, oh yeah, you could totally run. I'm like, I wish I could run Xdebug from the command line so that I can run my tests and use Xdebug. Like, yeah, you can totally do that. Why haven't you been doing that for 5 years? And I'm like, well, I didn't know. So it's actually relatively simple. We just need to export an Xdebug config value to set the ID key. So like you can either export it or you can just like use it as a one-time by putting it before the command you want to run. So this is really, really, really cool for when you're running your unit tests, for example, and you want to step debug. I love this. So if we move over to the command line, let's do, I think I can just do like PHP artisan test to run the tests. Oh, they pass, yes. Superb developer. So how do I step debug this? Well, we go back into our code. Let's open up a test, example test. And let's set the breakpoint here so that we can see what's going on. So I've got a breakpoint. my IDE is listening for connections. You'll notice a pattern of what I check before I try and start an Xdebug session every time. I've got a breakpoint set. I've got my IDE listening to connections. That's like the normal things that I do. And now I can go back to my slides. In fact, let's cheat. Let's just do this, right? So it's fine. So now I've got xdebug underscore config equals IDE key equals whatever. That's all it needs to be. And I do PHP artisan test, and you can see the command line's now like hanging, waiting for the next step to happen. And if we go here, you can see that I'm in my Xdebug session. So now I can debug my tests, which is, again, not as useful in some respects, because you're writing tests, but can be useful. Particularly like if you're writing, I don't know, artisan commands, which you want to run from your own command line, that kind of stuff. There's times where this can be really useful. So yeah, we can step into all of our tests now, and I'm just stepping into assert true equals true, so this is completely useless, but hey, it's your time, not mine. And then we can just carry on running through this. So this can be really, really, really useful as well. So I think, oh yeah, don't forget, if you use it, so if you use the global way of export xdebug config equals whatever, do not forget to unset that value. Otherwise, every time you run your tests, particularly if you've got your IDE configured to like pause at the first line if there's no breakpoints, you'll end up going, oh. You'll end up doing what I did and tweeting at Geordie saying, my composer is hanging every time I do a composer install. What could possibly be going wrong, Geordie? And him going, I don't know. And then me going, don't worry, Geordie, it was hanging on an Xdebug session waiting for me to step over something. I'm like, yeah, don't forget to unset the Xdebug config. So just unset it, it's fine. So there we go, that concludes my talk. I have time for questions. I'm very happy to take questions if anybody has questions. Did you, yeah?
Yeah, hold on.
Hi, Gary. Do you have enough time in just a couple of minutes to cover the difference between breakpoints and watch points, or is that a separate talk?
Yeah, I think this is basics, Mark, to be honest. Watch points, I mean, there's so much more you can do. Like, you can watch things and only trigger, like, it's fine. I don't think that's in the scope of this talk, but I appreciate your question. Is there any other questions?
What do you think about the impact of running tests with Xdebug enabled?
The performance impact, you think? Yeah.
So I mean, it's worth to disable it when I don't want to debug my tests.
I mean, right? Yeah, that's fine. I think that's really code-based dependent. There is a performance impact from having Xdebug installed and running all of the time. There is. For me, most of the time that isn't a problem, and I work on a legacy code base where there are like thousands of tests, and performance would be negatively impacted greatly if it was going to be a big deal. But because I work on a legacy code base, that's mitigated with me being able to step into the code, because I personally think that whenever I hear people say, I never need to use Xdebug in my daily job, my attitude is, you've never worked on a really old legacy code base. That's like, in my mind, and that's not judgmental, that's just like, oh, I don't know how I could do my job working on a code base that's, I don't know, 12, 10 years old, and not having written most of the code without using Xdebug to step into it. So that's a trade-off that I think is good for me. You can totally like mitigate that problem by using PhpStorm to run your tests for you, and then clicking the, if you configure PhpStorm correctly, and I think we've got a couple of seconds, so maybe if I can remember the keyboard shortcut, you can actually tell it the path to Xdebug, and it will only load Xdebug when you're doing a debug operation. It'll do that for you. It'll figure it all out for you. So there are ways that you can kind of mitigate that by like telling it the path to Xdebug and then saying, only run this when I run a debug operation. But yeah, there's definitely a performance overhead. I've never found it to be such a problem that I would want to unload Xdebug globally, but yeah, maybe you will find that is a problem.
We've got plenty of time, Gary. We can keep going.
I have a couple of questions from people online. So, can I use Xdebug with scripts launched from command line?
Absolutely, yeah. I think I did show that at the end of the talk. So what I was showing there, you can absolutely use it with any command line thing, right? So I could do PHP. Let's do this. CD public, where I have my like really basic, really super basic PHP script here. So I can run this by just doing PHP Xdebug, and then I could debug it in exactly the same way as I showed the unit tests by setting a breakpoint, checking that I'm listening for connections. Again, this is, you can see my routines here when I'm debugging because I've been bitten so many times. Like, why isn't this working? Oh yeah, I'm not listening for connections, it's fine. And then like setting the same Xdebug config variable and then doing PHP Xdebug, and hopefully this will just work. Yes, it does. So any command line script, you can just use the same methods.
Thank you. Another one, what pizza means in IDE key pizza when using Xdebug on the command line?
Thank you, whoever streamed that. So that was just me being naughty. If you look at the slide, it said pizza and pineapple on pizza in the slide, so I just copy and pasted that. Sorry. I didn't think I'd have to say that out loud. It would just be a little like sly joke for people who noticed it, but yeah, it's fine.
Okay, one last one. Maybe you already tell it. Have you ever used Xdebug with unit tests to figure out why test is failing?
Many times, yes. Many times. Again, we did cover that right at the end of the session there. Yeah, I tend to use Xdebug like all the time. I do still use like var dump and stuff, but I just tend to just turn to Xdebug all the time because it's configured and I'm familiar with it. So yeah, I use it to debug the simplest problems, if I'm honest. I'm lucky that we're in a position where we've got really good sort of tools to find, like if PHP doesn't lint properly, that gets caught quite quickly with our CI tool, with our quality tools. But yeah, I use it all the time, particularly in unit tests.
Any more questions?
Yeah, shoot.
When you're creating an API, is it also possible to use Xdebug with, for example, Postman?
Yeah, absolutely. So any situation where you're making an HTTP request, if that HTTP request has the query string parameter or sends the cookie, it will trigger Xdebug. So any situation, so for example in Postman you could set the cookie, right, quite easily in Postman, or even just add the query string to the URL and it would fire Xdebug. So any way that you, like I'm just using the browser because it's like an easy way for me to demo Xdebug to a room of people. But anyway you fire an HTTP request, like you could use curl. If you were using curl to trigger an API, you could just add the cookie as a parameter to curl or the query string parameter and it would fire Xdebug.
All right, thank you.
Well, I think that might be all. Thank you very much, Gary. A round of applause.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.